one former NBA referee has took the gloves off in this gambling scandal. He's exposing everybody.
Okay, get this. A shocking whistleblower just blew the lid off the WNBA, completely shattering the silence. And seriously, all eyes are now laser focused on Commissioner Cathy Engelbert because a former referee just dropped some absolutely explosive allegations, claiming that game outcomes weren't actually decided by the players on the court but were secretly pulled by strings from forces inside the league itself.
The whistleblowers is coming out of the woodwork. Now, we know Adam Silver was pressed hard this past weekend whenever he was out at games, making an appearance, and they wasted no time at all getting him pretty much putting the camera in his face, putting the mic in his face.
We're talking about everything from seriously suspicious foul calls to totally questionable officiating patterns. And let me tell you, this isn't just some random rumor flying around. This is a direct, undeniable hit right at the WNBA's credibility. Fans who've always believed in fair play are now screaming for answers. And honestly, what this referee just revealed could genuinely shake the entire WNBA to its absolute core.
You know, I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg. I think when you talk about arrests being made by the FBI, I think the guys that are arrested are going to sit down and, be scared to death with what they're facing, and they're going to start to cooperate, and they're going to tell the FBI everything they know, and this thing is going to spread like wildfire, and you're going to find out that this is a lot bigger than it is right now, and it's pretty big.
So, how did this all kick off? Well, it started with a single online post that sent absolute shockwaves ripping through the entire basketball world. A veteran WNBA referee, someone who'd spent years officiating the league's biggest games, by the way, finally decided to break his silence. In an interview that, no surprise, immediately went viral, he spilled the tea on how certain league officials allegedly influenced game results from behind the scenes. According to him, referees were sometimes getting these unspoken, unofficial instructions on which players to keep a closer eye on, which fouls to prioritize, and even how to, subtly shift the momentum of a match. Crazy, right?
People with power and money feel like the rules don't apply to them, and they're not going to get caught. And you get a little bit cocky like I did and think that you're going to get away with something like this, and you just don't. You eventually always get caught.
What seemed like total coincidence out on the court now, suddenly, looks a whole lot more like coordinated action. The whistleblower flat out claimed these directives weren't always coming from game supervisors. Oh no, sometimes they were coming from higher up, a phrase he used super carefully, by the way, without ever actually dropping Cathy Engelbert's name directly. But trust me, his tone said everything. He talked about these intense internal pressures to protect the league's image, even if that meant blatantly favoring certain teams or big-name stars, all for the sake of television ratings and those massive sponsorship obligations. So basically, things that were supposed to be fair competition, he revealed, just became carefully managed entertainment.
It's just a situation where, you're hanging out with the wrong people different times, and people are connected to the mob, and you get comfortable with somebody, you think they're your friend, and the next thing you know, they have something on you, or you're in an enormous amount of debt to them for some reason, and they have their claws into you, and they're going to put pressure on you to do things for them in regard to information, so that they can continue to make millions and millions of dollars.
And you know what? Fans who've been questioning seriously suspicious officiating during high-stakes matchups for ages suddenly felt completely vindicated. Like every single controversial call against a breakout rookie or a rising franchise suddenly started looking less like a mistake and more like it was totally deliberate. The whistleblower even dropped a bombshell, mentioning multiple times where referees were allegedly reprimanded for not following these subtle league cues. So it wasn't about outright fixing the score, no. It was all about shaping the narrative, deciding who would get to be the hero and who was going to take the fall.
When you talk about wire fraud, that's a law that can be applied to many different things. And if you're just calling your buddy and telling them that somebody's not playing, even if it's a nonchalant comment, you're transferring that over state lines, that's wire fraud, and that's what I was charged with. So yeah, there's no doubt in my mind some of these star players might have been saying something to their buddies back home that they weren't playing, or one of the other guys weren't playing, or they weren't 100%, and bets were placed and money was made.
Now, what makes this revelation even more explosive is the timing. I mean, with public scrutiny already at an all-time high over officiating inconsistencies, and fans absolutely losing it over Caitlin Clark's treatment, these accusations are landing like a stick of dynamite. The WNBA genuinely cannot afford another scandal right now. But despite that, the evidence is starting to pile up fast. And according to the whistleblower, this is just the beginning, because the people pulling the strings behind the curtain weren't just protecting stars. Oh no, they were allegedly protecting power itself, and that could change everything.
In my situation, I remember I thought I was just going to give the guy the picks for 3 months and be done with it. And the FBI agent said they would have never, released you. You were their golden goose. And if you would have stopped giving them the picks that they wanted, they would end up killing you. So, the mob is the mob, and it's still prevalent in the United States of America. I know people think that it's not, but, it's still, working very, very hard.
Okay, so once the whistleblower statement really hit the airwaves, fans immediately turned into internet detectives, combing through every past game, and what they started uncovering was absolutely alarming. I mean, footage after footage revealed moments that now looked far from coincidence. Star players mysteriously racking up early foul trouble, game-winning drives inexplicably halted by questionable calls, and underdog teams suddenly losing all their momentum right after taking the lead. The numbers, my friends, absolutely did not lie over the last 2 seasons. Statistics showed certain franchises getting a disproportionate number of calls in clutch moments, especially during nationally televised games. Online analysts started connecting all these crazy dots, building timelines, and sharing clips that painted this seriously disturbing picture. The supposed mistakes by referees weren't random at all. They followed undeniable pattern. Teams with major sponsorships or from big cities with higher TV ratings seemed to get favorable treatment, while smaller market teams or those without huge star power face significantly tougher officiating. And get this, one analyst even pinpointed how game footage showed refs consistently calling contact on one side of the court but just straight up ignoring identical plays on the other. It wasn't just inconsistency, it was starting to look like full-blown orchestration. And then came the smoking gun. Leaked internal emails started circulating online. Unverified, yes, but they seriously hinted at pressure from upper management to ensure marquee matchups stayed competitive and avoided blowouts that would harm engagement. If those lines are authentic, it suggests the league wasn't just overseeing games, it was actively shaping them for pure entertainment value. Naturally, fans went ballistic, demanding transparency, and sports journalists were calling this the biggest integrity crisis in women's basketball history. Meanwhile, Commissioner Cathy Engelbert dead silent. The league office put out this short, super carefully worded statement denying any intentional manipulation of gameplay, but for so many people, that denial just fueled even more suspicion. Because if the whistleblower's story holds up, the WNBA's entire reputation for fairness could collapse, and the deeper reporters dig into these strange patterns, the more the evidence screams systematic, not accidental. The question now isn't if manipulation happened, it's who gave the order and why. And as the scandal gained traction, one name kept popping up everywhere: Cathy Engelbert herself, the WNBA commissioner. Even though the whistleblower hadn't directly named her, her leadership style and decision-making history started facing intense scrutiny. Engelbert, who came from a corporate background, had always prided herself on building the league's business vision, but now, critics argued that this corporate mindset might have completely blurred the line between legitimate sports and pure spectacle. Her laser focus on ratings, sponsorships, and branding may have indirectly created an environment where manipulation could actually thrive. Several former employees even hinted that Engelbert was aware of internal staff concerns about referee accountability but allegedly dismissed them as just isolated incident. One former operations assistant even claimed that during a closed-door meeting, Engelbert emphasized protecting the league's image at all costs, especially during the high-profile rise of Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. The narrative was clear: marketability first, fairness second, and that's what infuriated fans the most. The whistleblower's comments just poured gasoline on the fire, describing how certain executives routinely influenced officiating trends to favor storylines that kept fan engagement ridiculously high. Investigators and reporters started piecing together timelines, showing that questionable calls seemed to spike during nationally televised matchups involving star players. Insiders even suggested that Engelbert's office had the final say on referee promotions and playoff assignments, a system that, theoretically, could be used to reward compliance and silence dissent. By now, sports media was circling like vultures, headlines blared with phrases like "Engelbert under fire" and "rigging allegations rock WNBA." While Engelbert publicly maintained her composure, her silence became absolutely deafening. For someone known to be so media savvy and calculated, her refusal to address the allegations head-on only intensified the suspicion. And behind closed doors, insiders whispered that this was only the tip of the iceberg, because if Engelbert truly had knowledge of manipulated outcomes, it wouldn't just be a scandal, it would be one of the biggest betrayals in WNBA history. But wait, there's more. As the controversy deepened, new reports started linking the alleged game manipulation to something far more dangerous: gambling influence. What began as whispers on social media quickly spiraled into a full-blown storm. Insiders claimed that certain WNBA match outcomes conveniently aligned with massive betting swings, often favoring unexpected results that benefited major syndicate. Fans started noticing how point spreads and over-under lines seemed almost too accurate, as if someone already knew how the game would unfold before tip-off. The whistleblower even hinted that internal data might have been leaked or influenced through subtle communication between referees and outside parties. No names were officially mentioned, but speculation exploded. Could individuals within the league have been feeding information to betting networks? And if so, how deep did this connection actually go? Investigative journalists started tracing money trails, finding unusual betting patterns surrounding games involving star players or major market teams, with some of these wagers reaching six figures, which is totally not typical for a women's basketball game. This whole theory took an even darker turn when a former NBA referee, infamous for his own gambling scandal years ago, came forward and claimed the WNBA might be following the exact same dangerous path. He warned that once gambling money enters the bloodstream of a league, it becomes nearly impossible to purge. The incentive to keep games close, entertaining, and unpredictable aligns perfectly with the interests of betting companies and potentially league executives seeking to grow revenue through viewer engagement. The public reaction was immediate. Fans flooded forums demanding a federal investigation. Media outlets questioned whether Cathy Engelbert's aggressive marketing partnerships with betting platforms had accidentally opened a back door for corruption. After all, the WNBA had recently expanded its gambling sponsorship deals, promoting responsible betting in nearly every broadcast. But now, the irony was just impossible to ignore. The league that promised transparency was being accused of selling its integrity for ratings and revenue. And as the whispers morphed into nationwide outrage, one question began echoing across the sports world: was the WNBA's gambling push the very thing that compromised its soul? The silence didn't last for long. As the story exploded across every sports outlet and social platform, several WNBA players began to hint that they too had noticed something wasn't right. Without dropping names, a few stars took to social media, posting cryptic messages about uneven treatment and knowing when the game was never ours to win. Others liked or reshared posts questioning referee integrity, sparking speculation that many athletes had felt manipulated long before the whistleblower even spoke. One veteran player, speaking anonymously to a major sports reporter, revealed that locker room conversations often included frustration over scripted momentum. She explained that there were moments in key games when players could sense calls shifting, not because of performance but because of narrative. "You could feel it," she said, "when the league wants a rivalry to stay alive, the whistle changes." That single quote went instantly viral, igniting conversations about how deep the psychological manipulation might actually go. Even younger players, like recent draft picks, started expressing unease. Some reportedly felt intimidated to speak up, fearing retaliation or reduced playing time. Behind closed doors, players' union representatives began demanding meetings with WNBA executives, pushing for clarity on officiating procedures and referee selection. The whispers of discontent were definitely turning into organized dissent. Meanwhile, fans rallied behind the players, flooding comment sections with messages of support and outrage. Many pointed out the profound irony that the league, which had long preached empowerment and equality, might have been exploiting its own athletes for commercial gain. The emotional toll was visible. Players who had fought so hard for visibility and respect suddenly found themselves questioning whether their victories were truly earned or completely orchestrated. As this new wave of testimonies poured in, pressure mounted on Cathy Engelbert to finally break her silence. The story had evolved from just an officiating scandal into a full-blown integrity crisis, one that now involved players, fans, and possibly even sponsors. And the next move Engelbert made would truly determine whether the league could survive the fallout or crumble under the weight of its own dissent. inception. By the time mainstream outlets picked up the story, it was already a national headline. ESPN, Fox Sports, even late-night hosts were dissecting the WNBA scandal in real time. Every single segment carried the same burning question: was the league rigging its own game? The phrase "rigged for ratings" began absolutely trending on social media as fans shared clips, slowed replays, and screenshots of suspicious calls that now looked impossible to ignore. The WNBA had built its entire brand on progress and empowerment, but overnight, that image started to completely crumble. Inside the league office, panic reportedly spread. Sources claimed emergency meetings were held to coordinate a unified response. Cathy Engelbert's communications team began frantically drafting statements while legal advisors urged silence. The WNBA quickly issued a carefully worded press release denying all accusations, calling them baseless and harmful to the integrity of our official. Yet this statement only fanned the flames. It sounded rehearsed, corporate, and totally detached, the exact opposite of what fans desperately wanted to hear. Analysts pointed out how Engelbert's tone eerily mirrored the NBA's response during its own referee scandals years ago, where transparency only came after public outrage became completely unavoidable. Her refusal to sit for live interviews just raised further suspicion. In the absence of leadership, the story took on a life of its own. Independent journalists started digging even deeper, uncovering links between referee promotions, sponsorship incentives, and broadcast partnerships. The deeper they looked, the messier it got. Meanwhile, social media erupted with player clips juxtaposed against referee reactions, proving how often calls seemed influenced by star status or even crowd size. Fan trust was at an all-time low. Commentators warned that if the league didn't address the issue soon, it might face congressional scrutiny, or worse, a federal probe. For a league already fighting for mainstream credibility, this was catastrophic. Engelbert's empire was cracking in full view of the entire world, and just when it seemed things couldn't spiral any further, one interview would soon surface that would take the controversy to a level no one, absolutely no one, could have predicted. Then the moment finally came, unexpected. A well-known investigative sports journalist sat down for an exclusive interview with the whistleblower, and what he revealed sent shockwaves through the entire basketball community. For the very first time, the former referee went on record, naming specific games, specific dates, and even specific league officials allegedly involved in influencing outcomes. He claimed that during certain high-profile matchups, directives came from what he called executive influence, strongly implying the commissioner's office. According to him, referees were quietly told to maintain balance or keep the game interesting whenever one team started to pull away. He even described one instance involving a primetime televised game, where a referee's decision to let play continue, instead of calling a clear foul, came directly from a courtside supervisor communicating through a headset. The goal, to simply extend the game's duration for broadcast value. Another shocking claim involved referee evaluations that penalized officials who failed to follow narrative expectations. Those who resisted were allegedly passed over for playoff assignments, which is the most lucrative part of the season. The whistleblower also produced a document he claimed was an internal memo discussing narrative-driven engagement. It was brief but absolutely damning, containing language about protecting fan interest games and controlling competitive pacing. Though the document's authenticity was still being verified, its tone was unmistakably corporate and eerily aligned with Engelbert's media-driven leadership style. Within hours, the interview went utterly viral. Sports outlets across the country replayed key clips, dissecting every single word. Hashtags like Jarn Rigged League and WNBA Exposed dominated social feeds. Sponsors began quietly reviewing their contracts, and fan petitions called for Engelbert's resignation. Even current and former players couldn't stay silent anymore. A few publicly supported the referee's courage to speak out, while others demanded a full-scale independent investigation. By the end of the week, the WNBA wasn't just facing a public relations nightmare, it was staring directly at the possibility of federal oversight. And as the dust settled from that interview, one thing became crystal clear: if Cathy Engelbert didn't respond soon, someone else, perhaps in Washington, absolutely would. In the days that followed that bombshell whistleblower interview, the WNBA entered full-blown crisis mode. What had started as an internal officiating controversy had now exploded into one of the biggest sports scandals in recent memory. Congressional leaders publicly called for transparency, with some lawmakers even demanding that the Department of Justice review the allegations of game manipulation and gambling interference. News outlets described the situation as a ticking time bomb for women's sports, and fans were left wondering whether they had been cheering for authentic competition or a carefully crafted illusion. Inside league headquarters, sources described an atmosphere of absolute fear and confusion. Emails were deleted, meeting schedules were changed, and staffers were reportedly warned not to speak to the press. Even players began questioning whether they could truly trust the system that governed their career. Some teams quietly reached out to their own legal counsel, preparing for the inevitable fallout if investigations uncovered proof of rigging. Meanwhile, the players' union demanded an emergency meeting with Cathy Engelbert, insisting that she address the allegations directly instead of hiding behind carefully worded press statements. But Engelbert's silence continued to dominate headlines. When she finally appeared at a press conference weeks later, her tone was calm but undeniably defensive. She denied all wrongdoing, insisted the league's integrity was beyond reproach, and promised to review officiating policies. Yet, her answers felt rehearsed, empty, a desperate attempt to simply control the damage. Reporters pressed her about the leaked memo and referee claims, but she dodged specifics. Her refusal to show any real transparency turned that press room into a total battlefield of disbelief. By that point, it was simply too late. Sponsors were pulling back, fans were walking away, and the players' trust in the league was completely shattered. What had once been hailed as the dawn of a golden era for women's basketball now teetered on the brink of collapse. The world had seen the cracks behind the curtain, and no PR strategy could hide them again. The WNBA's credibility wasn't just under fire, it was hanging by a thread, and for Cathy Engelbert, that thread might soon snap. So, where does this leave us? The WNBA now stands at a crucial crossroads. What began as mere whispers of unfair officiating has transformed into a full-blown integrity crisis, one that threatens to undo years and years of progress. The whistleblower's incredible courage ignited a reckoning that Cathy Engelbert and the league can simply no longer silence. Fans, players, and sponsors all demand one fundamental thing: the truth. Whether this monumental scandal leads to genuine reform or complete collapse depends entirely on what happens next. But one thing is absolutely certain: the trust that once fueled the WNBA's incredible rise has been shattered beyond recognition, and rebuilding it, that's gonna take far more than just statements. It's gonna take real, unwavering accountability.